Hello learners, welcome to the second part of the video lesson Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. In this video we are going to read part 2 and part 3 of this text and we are going to analyze and conclude this lesson. Let's get started. A few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe, or means in surprise, as a spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers roared in perfect formation over the Union buildings. So it is 10th May 1994. Nelson Mandela, like I already told you, is being elected as the president. He is being sworn in as the president, and in solidarity with the democratic government, the South African jets, helicopters and troop carriers are displaying their power. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision means accuracy, so it was not only a display of accuracy and military force, but a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to the new government that had been freely and fairly elected. So Mandela says that this display was not only a display of power, this display was not only a display of how good these South African jets were, but it was also a message to the world saying that the South African military forces stand with the new government that has been freely and fairly elected. Only moments before, the highest generals of the South African Defence Force and Police, their chests bedecked means decorated with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. So all of these generals of the South African Defence Forces, they had saluted Nelson Mandela because he was the new president, and they had pledged their loyalty. They had pledged to be loyal to the new government. I was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before they would not have saluted but arrested me. So Nelson Mandela says that I'm not unmindful, I'm not unaware of the fact that a few years back, these very people who are saluting me, who are saying that they are loyal to me, would have arrested me. Why? Because like he said, that they were treated as outlaws, they were treated as criminals in their own country. So these very people would have arrested him for spreading the ideas of democracy. But today, when the government has been elected, these very people are pledging their loyalty to people like Mandela, right? Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of black, red, green, blue and gold of the new South African flag. So all of these colors are the colors of the South African flag, and chevron means a V-shaped pattern or design. So Impala jets, that's the name of one of the fighter jets in South Africa, and they formed a V shape in the sky, and they are leaving a smoke trail of all of these black, red, green color, and it signifies that the South African flag, right? The day was symbolized for me by the playing of our two national anthems. So two national anthems are playing, and the vision of the whites singing Nkosi Sikelel' I Africa. So this is the name of one of the national anthems, and black singing Die Stem. This is the other national anthem, the old anthem of the Republic. So he is imagining the whites singing the new national anthem, which signifies democracy, and blacks singing the old national anthem, and which they did not even know by heart, although that day neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem that they had once despised. Despised means hated. They would soon know the words by heart, because he says that this national anthem is going to become the new national anthem of free democratic South Africa. On the day of the inauguration, which was 10th of May, I was overwhelmed with the sense of history. In the first decade of the 20th century, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned people of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned people of their own land. So he says that on this day of inauguration, on this day when I've become the president, I am overwhelmed by the history of this land that I've become a president of. He reminds us that in the first decade of the 20th century, meaning in 1910, around 1910, this system of racial segregation, this system of apartheid had started, and this was a result of the Anglo-Boer War, when the white people decided to come together and erect to make something stand up. So they erected a system of racial domination. They erected a system, a method through which they would dominate over the black people. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever known. So this structure that they had created, this apartheid, the system, the social political system that they had created, this formed the basis of one of the harshest. Harsh means cruel, bad. Harshest, most inhumane. Inhumane means something that does not, that lacks humane qualities, human qualities, societies the world has ever known. So this became one of the most inhumane, one of the most brutal societies in the world. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century, the last decade means the 1990s, right? And he's obviously talking in 1994. So he says, in the last decade of the 20th century and my own 8th decade as a man. He's obviously in his 80s. That system has been overturned. That system has been overthrown. That system has stopped existing forever and replaced by one that recognizes the rights and freedoms of all people regardless of the color of their skin. And what is the new system? The new system is the system of democracy. This is the system which recognizes the rights and freedom of all people. It treats everybody's freedom equally, right? He says that the system which was popular, which started in around 1900 to 1910, that has ended after so many years in the last decade of the 1900s, the last decade of the 20th century. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people, people whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. I felt that day, as I've on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. That long and noble line ended and now began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. So he says that now I realize that people before me have made unimaginable sacrifices. There have been a lot of people who have been patriots, true worshippers of the nation, and they have worked for their nation, but they're not here to see how their efforts have brought the fruits, right? The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and my people. All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. But the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect, and that was that it produced the Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sissulus, the Chief Luthulis, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Subukovs of our time. So he says the policy of apartheid was so bad that it created a wound in my country and my people. It almost injured us very badly. But there was also a positive effect of this bad system. And what was the positive effect? That it created so many good people, men of such extraordinary courage, unusual courage, wisdom and generosity, that their like may never be known again. So he says that out of this brutal, this bad system were born these gentlemen, these good men who were very courageous, who were very wise, and who were very generous. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. He says that man's character is formed by the oppression that they face, right? Because the more brutality that they face, the better they become, the more resilient they become, the better they become at dealing with problems, right? But my country is rich in the minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but I have always known that its greatest wealth is its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds. He says that the people of my country are finer than diamonds, and it's not the resources that we are famous for, it's not the resources that makes our country the best country, but the people who live here. It is from these comrades means partners in the struggle, that I learned the meaning of courage. Time and again I've seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I've seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Triumph means victory. So he says that I have seen so many people, my partners, struggle. I have seen people standing up to attacks without breaking. And he says that real people are not the people, brave people are not the people who are not fearful Obviously every human being has a fear, but real people, true people, the brave man is not the one who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear, he who triumphs over that fear, one who attains victory over that fear. That person is the actual brave person. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. You can see a picture here. These are little kids. They do not look at the other person's skin. They just make friends without any hate because they are not taught to hate, right? So he says that human beings are not born with the feelings of hate. We learn it. And similarly, we can learn the feelings of love also, because it is natural to human beings. Even in the grimiest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer, a shining hope of humanity in one of the guards. Perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. So he says that even when we were jailed and we had no hopes of getting out, I saw a shining hope, of some sort of humanity in one of the guards, and that's what restored my faith in humanity. That's what made me feel that humanity is not going to die. In life, every man has twin obligation. Twin means two obligations. Obligations to his family, to parents, to wife, children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. He says that each person has two obligations. One is towards their family and another is towards their nation. But a person like me who is born black, who is born in my community, cannot be both. Either they can work towards the freedom of their country, they can work towards the bettering their own country, or they can work towards bettering their own family. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. So why does he say that you can only follow one duty? Because if you are someone who is working for your country, if you are someone who is fighting for your country to make your country free, then you will be forced to be away from your family. You will be forced to run away. You will be put in jail. You will be forced to live away from your family, and you will not be able to fulfill any of the duties as a husband, as a father, as a brother. I was not born with hunger to be free. He says that I had no hunger to be free. I was born free. He always thought that he was born free. Why? Because he was free in every way that he could know. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bills. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. So he says, as long as I abided by the laws that my father had set out, I was totally free. I thought that I was free because I could do anything that I liked. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion. It was nothing but a mirage. It was not reality, right? It was unreal. When I discovered that as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me. So he says that when I was a child, I always thought that I was free. But when I became a young man, as I grew up, as I became an adult, I realized that the freedom had already been taken from me. That I began to hunger for it. And that's when my hunger for freedom began. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself. The transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I please, and go where I choose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family. The freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. So this is the journey of freedom that he's talking about. He says that when I was a little child, I thought that I was free. When I grew up, I found that my freedom was not there. It was just an illusion. It was just like a magic trick. It was not real, right? In the beginning, I just wanted freedom for myself. I was longing for individual freedom. And what does one want? The freedom to go out, the freedom to read whatever he wanted and all of that. But as he became older, he realized that these small freedoms were little freedoms, right? And you cannot ask for these freedoms if you realize that on a large scale you are still under somebody's oppression, right? So he wanted other sorts of freedoms, like freedom to marry, freedom to earn, freedom to learn, freedom to get admitted to any institution wherever he liked. So these were the freedoms that he wanted. But then I slowly saw that not only I was not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. So he says that towards the end, I started to realize that all of the freedoms that I had wanted were individual freedoms, were freedoms that I wanted for myself. But if there were people like me, my brothers and sisters. Brother and sister doesn't mean siblings here. It means the people of my country. He says that I saw that my brothers and sisters, the people of my country, were not free at all. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. So he says that that's when I realized that it is not only about my freedom. I was only thinking about myself and my freedom, but everybody who looked like me, everybody who was a black, everybody whose skin was dark, their freedom was curtailed. And that's when he realized the meaning of true freedom. This is when I joined the African National Congress. That this is the party that he belongs to, right? And that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. So he says that there was a hunger for getting freedom for myself, but then it transformed, it changed into hunger for the freedom of my people. So he wanted to work for the freedom of the people of his country. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity, with respect. Dignity means respect, and self-respect that animated my life, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one. So he says that it was this desire, I wanted this freedom so badly, that made me a changed person completely. It changed a scared, frightened means scared young man into a bold person, a law-abiding attorney. Attorney means lawyer. A law-abiding attorney, a lawyer who always followed laws and rules. It made that lawyer to become a criminal. And why was he a criminal? Not because he was committing any crimes, but obviously he was going against the government, and the government obviously was bringing out laws related to apartheid, related to segregation, right? So he was working against it. So he was obviously doing illegal activity. So he became a criminal in the eyes of the law. That turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home. So I was a husband once, but when I started to fight for freedom, I became a man without a home. And I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. So he says that there were some freedoms that I had, but I could not enjoy those freedoms. Why? Because he saw that his brothers and sisters, his countrymen, were not free at all. Freedom is indivisible. Indivisible means something that cannot be divided, right? The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. So if any one of my people, of my countrymen were chained, it means that we all are chained. And if we all are chained, then it means that I am chained. So my freedom is related to everybody's freedom. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated, must be freed. Liberated means to free somebody, right? Just as surely as the oppressed. So an oppressor is somebody who discriminates. And who is the oppressed? Somebody against whom the discrimination happens, right? If a person A is hitting a person B, then person A is the oppressor and person B is the oppressed, right? And he says that both of them should be liberated. Both of them require freedom. Why? Because a man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. A person who discriminates against somebody and who kills somebody's freedom, takes away somebody's freedom, is a prisoner of hatred. They are themselves a prisoner and they hate. He's locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. So they are narrow-minded, not very broad. Narrow-minded means it's the opposite of broad-minded, obviously. And they are locked behind the bars of prejudice. They are locked behind the bars of stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, bias, right? And because they are biased, they are prejudiced, they discriminate against other people, they are logged, right? Their minds are logged. I am not truly free if I'm taking away someone else's freedom. Just as surely I'm not free when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. So both of the oppressor and the oppressed do not are robbed of their humanity. They don't have any humanity left if they oppress, or if somebody is oppressing somebody else, right? So that was the lesson. Let's move on to the analysis and the conclusion. These are the major themes. Let's analyze them one by one. The first is love and brotherhood. So the lesson says that people can be taught to love just like they can be taught to hate. So racism is not something that you're born with. Hatred for somebody, prejudice, bias is something that you're not born with. If you look at any children, they don't discriminate against anyone. They love everybody equally. But as we grow up, we learn certain stereotypes. We live in a society where people teach us that certain people are bad, certain people are better than us, certain people are worse than us, and that's how we love. So if hatred can be taught, love and brotherhood can also be taught, right? The second theme is discrimination and oppression. We've already discussed the meaning of the word discrimination, and oppression is the same as discrimination. When you take somebody's rights away, you are oppressing them, right? He says that discrimination and oppression cages both the oppressor and the oppressed. Both the oppressor who is oppressing and the oppressed are caged because they lose their humanity in such cases. Out of this brutal oppression are born the best of human beings. So there is a positive side to this oppression also. And what is the positive side? That some of the best men are some of the best human beings are born due to this oppression, because they are forced to be the best version of themselves. They're forced to be wise, and they're forced to be resilient, they're forced to be good problem solvers, and that's how they become better, when they realize that they have to not only help themselves but they have to help the world, right? The third theme is the idea of nation. A country is not what it is because of its resources, but because of its people. Like he says that my country is beautiful, is the best because I have people who are better than diamonds, right? It's important to pay homage to the people who sacrifice their life for the freedom struggle. The next theme is freedom. Individual freedom doesn't matter if others like you are not free. Absolute freedom of every individual is very important. So this is one thing that we have discussed in detail. Nelson Mandela says that when we are not thinking about the world, when we are only thinking about ourselves, we are being selfish because we are only thinking about our individual freedom. But as we grow, we realize that there are people like us who are not free, who don't even have the freedom that we have. And that's when we start to think about the world, we start to think about our countrymen. And freedom is not freedom, it is indivisible. It's not freedom until every single person gets that freedom, right? So every individual's freedom is as important as your own freedom. So that's it for this lesson. Thank you so much.